Okay. So we are chapter 3, and I love the Megillah. The Megillah, where are we so far? What happened, the stage had been set for the future redemption of the Jewish people, that the healing, the medicine, the cure, God says, I prepare before the illness. So everything that happened beforehand was just setting the stage for what was to come. And in Hebrew, whenever we say, Achar hadvarim ha'ela, after these words, that is a link between the past chapter and what we're going to say. Because whenever it says after these words, it means a continuation. So for the uninformed reader, at the end of chapter 2, if you were trying to predict the next plot in the movie you did not watch, so what happened? In those days, Mordechai was sitting in the king's gate, and Bigsan and Seresh plotted against the king, and Mordechai saves their life. Mordechai saves the king's life. He tells Esther about it, and the conspirators are hung, and the day is saved. So what comes next? What do you think should come next if you were writing a story? Any thoughts? Mordechai should be rewarded.
Yeah.
That's what should happen. That's what we expect. After these words, who should be uplifted? Mordechai. Instead, some new guy shows up in town, someone we've never heard of. Now, the Megillah is a book where there is lots of allusions to other biblical texts that fill in the gaps. And that's something we have to always remember. Let's see if we missed anyone here. We have to always remember, because we lose sight of many of the stories if we don't recognize that there are links to other sources, to other biblical texts that help make sense of everything. So after these events, what happens? King Ahasuerus promoted Haman. He uplifted Haman, the son, in Hebrew, Gidal HaMelech. He made great, and he lifted him up, he exalted him, and he placed his chair above all the other chairs, all the other thrones that were with him. Now, this language is reminiscent of the language with Joseph, that Joseph is also placed higher than all the others. And the Joseph story is a backdrop to the whole Megillah. I gave a whole separate class on this once, but just in a nutshell, Joseph is also a Jew in a foreign land where he rises to power and he saves his people. Esther is a similar story. They even in the Midrash, they have similar nicknames. Hadassah, Myrtle, is a name used for Joseph too. But there are many, many, many allusions to the Joseph story in the Megillah. And we'll do a few of them in this chapter. But I would just say that one of the fundamental themes is that in Joseph's story, God is very present. Every time something happened, God is there. Joseph says, God helped me, God provided, God will make me successful. Esther, God is conspicuous by his absence. But if we read these stories linked together, we get to fill in the gaps. But what happens? All right, in other words, Joseph helps us see God in the Megillah story. Things that seem happenstance, we're going to see in the hand of God. And it's true, Haman is being uplifted. The Midrash has a story. The Midrash has a story that the young donkey complains to his mother, Mama, it's not fair. The sow, the pig, is being fed so much and does no work. And we work so hard and we get a limited amount of food. And they give that pig whatever it wants. And the mother says, don't worry, my son, you will see. And then the beginning of the month is the Roman holiday. And they take the pig, the Gentiles, where this donkey was living, and slaughter the pig in honor of the Roman gods. And the Mother says, see my son? The next day, they bring in food for the baby donkey. He doesn't want to eat it. He's making a correlation between eating food and getting killed. So he's like, I'll be, religious about this. I will avoid it. So the mother donkey says, my son, it's not the eating, but it's rather the lack of productive labor that allows for the animal to be raised just for meat, just to be killed. But the point here is the Medrash is saying Haman is being raised in order to have a downfall. Haman, this whole point is he's lifted up. Yeah, he's going to be lifted up 50 cubits high on a tree, ultimately. But we don't see the full picture. This is our problem, and this is the solution of the Megillah. We look at life with its ups and downs, and we think happenstance. The Megillah tells us, hand of God. We look at life and see disaster. God sees opportunity. And this is the whole story. So Haman is uplifted, and you and I, who know the end of the story, know that his uplift is going to be a physical one, not one of social stature. Okay, and all the king's servants who were in the king's gate would kneel and prostrate themselves before Haman, for so had the king commanded concerning him. But Mordecai would neither kneel nor prostrate himself. I'm just going to put it Hebrew as well, if that's okay, because it allows for much better analysis. So in the Hebrew, korim u'mishtachavim. Korim u'mishtachavim. Anyone remember those words from our prayers? Va'anachnu.
Yeah.
Korim u'mishtachavim. We kneel and prostrate ourselves in the whole Tanakh. The only weird place where it says Korim Mishtachavim is to God. It's never used, not even for idols. So what we see here, this idea of worship, Korim Mishtachavim, is being used for Haman. So we have a problem here. When we read the biblical text, we don't understand why Mordecai is not bowing. Between you and me, and there were Jews who thought this way, it looks like Mordecai was instigating the anti-Semitism. Mordecai, why are you making a scene? Bow down. Big deal. What's your problem? You want to give the anti-Semites an excuse to hate the Jews? And that's what actually happened. For so had the king commanded concerning him. But Mordecai would neither kneel nor prostrate himself. We don't know why in the text. Here's the problem. The text doesn't tell us why about anything. But when it comes to such a central plot element, we really need to know why. So the words can help us. Number one, korim mishtachavim, which means religious worship of God even. So number one explanation is it wasn't about acknowledging a king. We find Jacob bowing to Esau, and this theme will come up to Esav. We find bowing to kings. There's not a problem of showing respect by bowing, but the language here is one of almost worship. Not even almost, it's worship language stolen from the Torah to apply to Haman. So what the sages say is Haman either wanted to make himself a god, or he had an image of a god, much as maybe you find in certain Christian circles, a large crucifix on the priest or whatever it was. Here, there was an idol of sorts. So if you bow down to Haman, you'd be bowing down to the idol. And this was not what the king intended. But what's interesting here is Mordecai, after seeing what happened to Vashti, where she refused, he's also refusing the king. He's doing it maybe subtly, but there were Jews who had a critique of Mordecai. Mordecai, you're instigating anti-Semitism. Why are you sticking it in the eye of Haman? So there are different opinions about how Mordecai and why he was acting. One was avoidance of idol worship. There's another theme, though. If you remember, we spoke about the sin of that generation. There are different opinions about what the cardinal sin was that they deserved to be threatened with annihilation. One opinion was that they had had pleasure from the feast of Achashverosh, or they'd eaten non-kosher. Those are both not cardinal sins, so Those explanations are problematic. Maybe we'll come back to them another time. But a classical understanding is the generation had worshipped idols when Nebuchadnezzar had told the Jews and everyone else they had to worship him, but he himself had made himself into a god as well, where it's explicit in the book of Daniel. And Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah, Daniel's three buddies, they don't worship, and they get thrown into fiery furnace, and they're saved. And those who tried to kill them are killed. That there are those that say Mordechai was trying to show the Jews that we have to rectify the sin of the previous generation. And in truth, this was a beneath the surface, an issue that was there boiling from the time of Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, but Mordechai lo yichrev lo yishtachlev. In Hebrew, yichrev is future. Mordechai would never bow. It's like a prophecy. Mordechai was never going to bow. He was adamant about it. And even more than that, it's almost like a prediction. So some say the text is saying the king had not commanded that Mordechai had to do it, but it was for everyone else. But either way, there's no question, as we'll see, Haman sees this as a problem. Then the king's servants who were in the king's gate, verse said to Mordechai, why do you disobey the king's orders? Haman doesn't notice it. It's the people. It's the servants. Now it came to pass when they said this to him daily. Okay, Ka'amram, a love, yom vayom. It's written Bi'amram, but we pronounce it Ki'amram. He did not listen to them. They told this to Haman to see whether Mordechai's words would stand up, for he had told them that he was a Jew. Somehow Mordechai's explanation about why he's not bowing is because he's a Jew. This fits in with the idol worship very well. I would just say, let me get the annotation tool here. Highlight is easier, spotlight. If you look here, it says yom yom, daily, day by day, they would harass him. So if you look here in Genesis, it came to pass after these events that his master's wife lifted up her eyes to Joseph and she said, lie with me. She tries to convince him. Look at verse 10. He kedabrel Yosef yom yom, every single day. V'lo shama eleha, and he did not listen to her to sleep with her. And then he refuses. So the Yosef story ends up being found here as well, which is, how do I get rid of that? Which is this idea that he's refusing to listen. And it's a constant attempt. Okay. And also, it's the idea that just like idol worship, illicit relations is a cardinal sin. So that's another linkage to the Joseph story that Mordechai is showing when it comes to religious matters, the moral fiber of Joseph. And what happens? Vayar Haman, and Haman saw that Mordechai would neither kneel nor prostrate himself before him. Haman became full of wrath. Now this is similar, again, to Vashti. Vashti refuses something and the king gets angry. And then Memuchan, who we said, according to many opinions, is Haman, is the one that tells the king, don't just strike Vashti. Rather go against all the women. In a similar fashion here, Haman, he sees Mordechai is refusing to bow. It became contemptible for him to just lay hands on Mordechai alone. They told him Mordechai's nationality. And Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout Achashverosh's entire kingdom, Mordechai's people. Hebrew word to look at, lahashmid. We're going to have different words used here. And if we look at the words closely, it'll help us understand some of the elements of the text. He wants to lahashmid, to wipe out. Wipe out. That's what he wants to do. But why? Well, Mordechai is not worth it for me. I got to get the whole people. But some say it's related that he said he was a Jew, that the motivation why he was not bowing was because he's a Jew. And I don't worship the idols. And Jews don't worship the idols. That's what caused him and stimulated his response, because he saw Mordechai not just as Mordechai, but as quintessential Jew. B'chodesh harishon, the first month, and before he even asked permission from the king, if it's allowed or not, in the 12th year of King Achashverosh, Hipil Pur, he cast the Pur. Hu HaGorel. This is the Gorel. That's the Hebrew translation of Pur. Pur is a Persian word. It's related to an Assyrian word that means bowl. They used to put dice or something similar into a bowl and shake it. And it was a Fnei Haman, before Haman, Miyom Liyom, a day to day, Umechodesh Lechodesh, a month to month. So in the biblical text, it says that there are seemingly two different lotteries, which is one of the reasons why we say Purim. It's called Purim, which means Goralot, which means plural form of lottery. And he made a lottery to see when would be the proper day if he would have success in killing the Jews or not. And it fell out on the month of Adar. It doesn't say what day it fell on, because some say that he was not having success in the dice falling in a way. This is like reading the tea leaves or some other element. It wasn't working for him that he was seeing a clear day that would be appropriate to kill the Jews. But the month it fell on was Adar. He liked Adar because Moses, like Goebbels after him among the Nazis, was familiar with Jewish tradition. And he knew that Moses had died in the month of Adar. What he didn't know is Moses was also born on the month of Adar. Some say that the lottery fell out for the 13th day of Adar, which is the end of the 7 days of mourning for Moses. So he felt, oh, that is a good sign because Moses died, but while they're mourning him, that merit might protect them. So the Medrash has a whole theme that Haman is trying, as much as the evildoers before him, to work within the parameters, like Bilam and others, that God has a special plan for the Jews and they have special merit. But he, so to speak, will outsmart it and figure out a way that God should destroy them. So one of the things that Haman is happy about, as he'll say, is like there were no holidays in the month of Adar. So God, so to speak, smiles and say, there's no holidays. You're going to have more holidays on Adar. It'll be more joyous than all the other holidays. Later on, when he complains about the Jewish people, some say he complains that they're feasting all the time. They always have holidays. And God says the same thing. You're complaining about their holidays? You're going to give them the biggest holiday. But going back, what is the idea of a lottery? Now, this is a crucial point of the whole story. The holiday is called after this word poor. It seems to be not that important. Who cares how he figured it out? So if you could take a look at, in Hebrew, he says, Hipul Pur Hu HaGorel Lifnei Haman, before Haman. Well, we have another similar idea in the first month of our year. We have two first months, Nisan, and then we have 180 days earlier, Tishrei, when there's a lottery too, that we bring two he-goats, and the Kohen Gadol takes the two he-goats, and what does he do? He places them before the Lord, Lifnei Hashem, before Hashem, not before Haman. The biblical text of the Megillah borrows language from the Torah to create a linkage and a distinction and a counterpoint. And this allows us to understand what's going on here. V'nas, and Aaron shall take the two goats, and one goes to the Lord and one goes to Azazel. This is the scapegoat that we speak of. And the other one is brought up before the Lord. That's the terminology used throughout this story of the service of Yom Kippur. What's the point? On one basic level, Haman is trying to find a window of time that where the destiny and fate of the Jew is going to be sealed. So the idea of a lottery can be seen in two contradictory ways. One is there's a hand of fate, the Ides of March, or whatever it may be, that is a prophecy and it's going to happen, and there's destiny. For the Jew, the Goro, a lottery represents the will of God, above reason, above logic, for sure above nature. So the lottery that Haman is dropping is for himself, ultimately, that he's going to end up hung on the tree. It's before him, but it's for him as well. In other words, the Jewish idea of divine providence in the things that seem most happenstance, which are games of chance and lottery, that is where we believe that God's hand is there too, which is why Purim is such a central name and term for our holiday. Any thoughts before we go further? Okay, I will continue. So, in the first month, we're going to keep track of the time here. So this is basically 11 months away. The decree of Haman is for 11 months from now, Adar. And by the way, this is the source, a source for the 12th, for the leap year, that we make a leap year, because the reason why Jews have a leap year is because the lunar year is 354 days and the solar year is 355, 354, depending. And we lose 10 days a year and the seasons get off kilter. We want Passover to be in the springtime. So we add a month. But why do we add the month of Adar? So we want to have the last possible chance to add, to make sure to see when the grain is ripening, if the seasons are off yet too much. But there's another allusion here, that the 12th month of the year is always Adar. We see it in verse 7. 12th month is the month of Adar. Okay. What does Haman say? And Haman said to King Achashverosh, she comes, Yeshno am echad, there's a certain people. Now I want to just look at the Hebrew. Yeshno can also be read as they're asleep. They are asleep, Yeshenim. They are asleep from Torah and mitzvot. So this is what we spoke about on Sunday, is that the text that Haman is using, the words that we quote Haman as complaining about the Jews, are also seen as on a different plane of existence, being the critique of Satan against the Jews. So let's read it as Haman would read it first. There's a certain people scattered and separate from among the people throughout all the provinces of your kingdom, and their laws differ from those of every people, and they do not keep the king's laws. It is therefore no use for the king to let them be. So on a very simple level, they are scattered, they do not have political power, their laws are different, they don't assimilate well, they don't play well with others, and they don't listen to the king. What does that mean? Their religion comes first, they have an element of dual loyalty, it's not worth it. The Hebrew words and the English words of the next verses, it seems to be an economic argument, as we'll see. So, on a spiritual level, Satan says to God, the Jewish people are not following your commands. So it's an illusion. The king is God. The rules are the mitzvot. They are fragmented. They're not united. But in truth, it is Haman himself who reveals the innate unity of the Jewish people and the innate commitment of the Jewish people to God. So what does he say? Im al melech tov, if it is good to the king, yikaseh, he should write, la abdam. So the Hebrew word abdam is to make them be lost, okay? We translate in English here, destroy, but you'll see this is not such a simple word. It can be understood in more than one way, as you'll see clearly at the end of the Megillah. But he says, let us abdam, let us get rid of them. Vaseres alafim kikar kesef, and 10,000 silver talents. That's 750 tons of silver, which is equivalent to $500 million today. Should be paid to Osei HaMalacha, those who do the work. We don't know what it means yet. To bring it to the king's treasuries. He says, I'm going to give you $500 million. What's that money from? Where's that money from? Either Haman was incredibly wealthy. We know that the kings of Persia were incredibly wealthy. We find the Greeks describe the wealth that they took from there, incredible wealth, more silver than is known that exists today even in the world. Tremendous amounts of silver and gold. But we're not sure where Haman. Either Haman himself had found great treasures of past generations, and he was using all his money to destroy the Jews. For him, it was about power and pride. It wasn't about money. I mean, he's ego above all. One guy doesn't bow down to him. He wants to wipe out a nation. It's ego. Achashverosh is appetite. But Haman is ego, pride, like Amalek. So what is going on here? He's telling the king, I'll pay you whatever it's going to cost you. You're going to lose taxes, productivity. This is, I'll give you the money, $500 million. And what does the king do? The Yasar HaMelech Tabato. The king removes his ring from his hand and gives it to Haman, the son of Hamdasa, the Agagite, the adversary of the Jews. This is his very definition. He is the enemy of the Jews. Who is he? An Agagite. Who is an Agagite? Agagite was an Amalek, who Saul had failed in killing. Agag, the king of the Amalekites, who escaped, impregnated a woman, rather. She escaped and gave birth to Haman's great-grandfather, where he was raised with hatred of Jews from his earliest age. And what does he do? So he gives his ring. You know, the Medrash says, look at this. Normally, if I'm borrowing money from you, if I want something from you, so I give you something of value in order to if I'm asking you a favor. Here, the king takes off his ring and gives it to Haman. And then what does the king say? The silver is given to you and the people to do to them as it pleases you. Now, if you look at the Hebrew so far, he asked in verse 9, let it be written, we said to destroy. But I told you that the word destroy is la'abdam, which means to make them, to get rid of them. Not destroy. Lahashmid is to destroy. La'abdam is to somehow get rid of them. And here I want to show you another biblical text about the word la'abdam. When God is cursing the Jews about when their terrible bad behavior will cause terrible curses to come upon the Jewish people, in verse 38 it says, va'avadetem, and you will be lost. The Hebrew word va'avadetem, you'll be lost among the nations. Same word. And the land of your enemies will consume you. And the word va'avadetem, you'll be lost, doesn't mean destroyed, because the verse continues in 39. Because of their iniquity, those of you who survive will rot away. Nebuch, God forbid. And then they'll repent, and I'll bring them all back to the land of Israel. I'll remember my covenant. I'll return you, and I'll never forget you. So, despite the fact the biblical text in Vayikra uses the word va'avadetem, it doesn't mean destroyed. As a matter of fact, it means you'll be sold to slaves. So, we're going to see the end of the story. Esther says to the king, if we would have been sold to slaves, I wouldn't have made a big deal. But now they wanted to kill me. And Achashverosh freaks out. Who did this? What do you mean who did this? Are you a drunken idiot with short-term memory loss? You don't remember you signed the decree a few days ago? What's going on there? What does Achashverosh not know? So one classic way of reading the text is he doesn't tell the king that he's going to write to kill them. He uses an ambiguous word to la'abdam, to get rid of them, which the king assumes not to kill, but to enslave them, to sell them off, to take away their money. Some would say maybe Haman's $500 million, 710,000 silver talents, is going to come from the money that they take from the Jews. But be that what it may, the point though is that if one can make the argument that the king had agreed to sell the Jews as slaves, he had agreed to sell the Jews as slaves, but not to destroy them. Look what happens next. Verse 12, and the king's scribes were summoned the first month of the 13th day, and it was written according to everything that Haman had ordered. So Haman is the one ordering. And he orders the satraps and the governors over each province and the princes, and he wrote it each one in their language, just like this is the exact same terminology used by Vashti. It was written by who? By Haman, in the name of Achashverosh, and was sealed with the king's ring. You know, the king, although with all the trappings of power that the story seems to give him, both in the beginning and the end, he ends up being acted upon by everybody. Memuchan is the one that gives him advice to kill his wife. His wife is the one that refuses. Then the Haman is the one that comes up with this idea to kill the Jews. And then he takes advantage, or he is fulfilling it. But either way, Haman is the one taking care of it. Then Esther comes, and everyone's being, so to speak, acting and moving the king, which is another message. And the message is that ultimately everything, every player, so to speak, is ultimately going to play its role in a proper manner in the plan of God. And we're going to see this with Esther herself as well. All right, so what we have here is that Haman, according to the reading we just took here, he seals it with the king's ring, but the commandment of the king had agreed to was la'abdam, to make them, to get rid of them, not to murder and kill, but to enslave them, as we'll see at the end of the Megillah. But look what he says, it says clearly in the letter. And letters shall be sent by the hands of the Rutzim to all the king's provinces. To do what? Here are the words. Lahashmid, laharog, ulabed. To destroy, kill, and cause to perish. All the Jews, both young and old, little children and women, on that day. On one day. On one day, which is when the 13th day of the 12th of the month, which is the month of Adar, and the spoils be taken as plunder. This is like the Nazis did Yamach Shemam, may the name be erased, when you saw the Ukrainians or others in different time periods, the Latvians, the Poles. I'm sure there are righteous among the nations in every group, but the fact that they allowed people to plunder the Jewish property made it incentive for people to do it. The fact is that the soldiers may not have been as willing here in this story, but the commandment was to allow the population to attack and to keep whatever booty they want. This was an incentive. Normally, it goes to the king when there's a war, but this is their blood and money is forfeit. Take what you want. You know, my grandmother was in Hungary when the Nazis were already invading. So the rules started, but she was giving birth to my aunt in the hospital, and she had a down blanket. And one of the other women or nurses in the hospital said to her, "They're going to kill you anyway. Why don't you give me the blanket?" That was a nice approach. What you have, it says here, when a Jew would go into the marketplace, the Persians would tell him after seeing this, just you wait until next time. You know, just you wait till the day I'll kill you and take your stuff. I have to tell you, you know, a lot of times there's a lot of revisionism that goes on in the world and even in the Jewish world. So 1991, during the Crown Heights riots, where you had people who today are considered part of the black leadership, like Al Sharpton, were inciting the crowds and whipping up the crowds into a murderous frenzy. And the police were standing by because Dinkins wanted to let them vent their wrath and their anger and not whatever. and the police were having their cars burned, and they were also standing down. So after the riots were quelled, at some point, we had a neighbor, educated, African-American couple, educated, not wildings from that were imported to riot on buses. And they tell my father, one day they were upset about where the garbage can was placed. They said to my father, just wait till the next riots. This is, what happens? What happens is you can have those who, the mob mentality can allow people who you wouldn't expect it, whether it was among, of course, I'm not making this all into one mush of Nazis and Persians and the riots, but the idea is people's base instincts can come to play, and your neighbors who you think are your friends may turn out not to be so. Of course, the only reason my aunt and my mother and my grandparents survived was because of rights as Gentiles. So this is not a across the board condemnation, but it's a reality, and you see it here. You see it here. This idea, the methodology, ushlalam avos, their spoils are plunder. And then he describes the copy of the writ was for an edict to be given in every province, published to all the peoples, to be ready for that day. Haratzim yotzir dechufim, they ran out in haste with the king's order, and the edict was given in Shushan, the capital. And the king and Haman sat down to drink. And the city of Shushan was perturbed, was confused. Why are they confused? Well, first, why are they drinking? Either sitting to drink is a sign of not caring. You just signed the death. You just did the conference of the final solution, and you sat down to have cocktails. You show you don't care at all. Others say there's a twinge of conscience, even in a Haman, when you, an Achashverosh, and the drinking is to dull the consequence. I think the first makes more sense based on Jewish history. I don't want to ascribe to Haman even a twinge of guilt. They sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan, Rashi understands that to mean the Jews. That whenever it says the city of Shushan is the Jewish population, because if you look throughout the Megillah, there's the term Shushan and the city of Shushan. And Rashi and other Midrashim follow the approach that the city of Shushan is the Jewish, where the Jews lived. But others say even the Persians are very confused here. Some of them, what is this? You're going to wipe out a whole nation for no sin? For what? All of a sudden, these people who've been loyal subjects of the king are going to be wiped out? Okay. I know I missed a few other elements here, but we'll come back. So the gist of what we just explained here is those who missed the beginning. Haman gets upset that Mordechai doesn't bow. He sees it as being an expression of Mordechai's Jewishness, and therefore he decides he's going to wipe out all the Jews. He approaches the king, offers a tremendous amount of money. The king says, keep your money, and you could do with them as you wish. It does seem from the text here and later on, the king is not aware that they're going to be actually physically annihilated. He thinks the final solution is going to be they'll be enslaved, they'll be sold, whatever it may be, but he doesn't see the annihilation of men, women, children, which is explicit in the language of Haman to be written. It is not explicit in the verse. He just uses an ambiguous term called la'abdam, which we found to mean to be lost, wandering about, enslaved, exiled. There are different meanings of the word, but it doesn't have to mean complete destruction like lahashmid, laharog, ula'abed. Okay. So here we are. Any thoughts before we go to chapter 4? There are no bad questions. Okay. When I was a kid, I think 4th grade, my teacher, Rabbi Klein, we went through the whole Megillah inside with Midrashim. So there are certain things I remember today insights that he had shared with us then that are just part of the beauty to me of the story going way back. But here we have Mordechai yada es kol asher nasa, and Mordechai knew all that had transpired, which could also be read. He also knew everything that would happen. And Mordechai tore his clothing, put on sackcloth and ashes, and he went out in the midst of the city and cried with a loud and bitter cry. So Mordechai knows everything. How does he know everything? Either it's prophecy. Somehow Mordechai knows something others don't know. Whatever's common knowledge, we said everyone knows. So what's the point? Mordechai knowing. Mordechai knows it was revealed to him the inner secrets of the conversations, as we're going to see in a minute, because the other stuff was a private conversation of the king and Haman. So how does he know it? Either through prophecy, and Rashi quotes a medrash that the master of dreams told him. It wasn't a prophecy, it was a dream. Mordechai, according to the medrash, had dreams in the second year of King Achashverosh's rule, that a decree would come upon the Jews to annihilate them. He had premonition of evil lurking, coming, the great darkness to sweep the world. He felt it in his nightmares and his dreams, and he told Esther about it. But now it had come to fruition. It's happening. Everything he had been afraid of, his premonitions, are unfolding. But Rashi says it was told in a dream. So I remember one of the commentaries. It says he knew everything that would happen. In other words, he knew the happy ending too. If he knew the happy ending, why is he crying? Why is he weeping? So based on the medrash that it was a dream, the challenge of a dream is there are elements in dreams that are not true. It's not always a clear prophecy, even if it is a premonition dream. There are different types of dreams. There's nonsense dreams. There's bad digestion dreams. There's dreams about what you think about during the day. There are premonition dreams, and they're prophetic dreams. So Joseph had prophetic dreams. The question here, Mordechai, according to this interpretation, was not sure if everything would unfold exactly like he sees in his dream. So therefore, he has doubts. But be that what it may, there are other ways to resolve this, that Mordechai finds these things out, prophetic insight, somehow he knows. What does he do? First thing he does, he puts on sackcloth and ashes. And he went out in the midst of the city and cried with a loud and bitter cry. And he came as far as the king's gate. Remember, he used to live at the king's gate? He used to stand there as one of the judges and one of the high authorities. That's where he would go. And he doesn't go into the gate, for one may not enter the king's gate dressed in sackcloth. And every province, now Mordechai knows what's happening, but he knows something more, because in verse 3, in every province, wherever the king's orders and edict reached, there was great mourning for the Jews. And what were they doing? Fasting and weeping and lamenting. Sackcloth and ashes were put on the most prominent. Now the Hebrew word, the most prominent, larabim, some say it means larabim in the Rishus Harabim, in the public sphere. In the public sphere, this wasn't just private, but they were actually doing this all publicly, that they were repenting. Now, why are they fasting? They're fasting. This is the religious act of the Megillah. The Megillah does not mention God, doesn't mention prayer, but fasting is a religious act. And we know what fasting is. Like the prophets tell us, a fast day without repentance is not a fast day. A fast day without charity is not a fast day. A fast day where your hands are filled with blood or whatever it may be is not a fast day. You have to change your behavior and repent. So they're repenting. That's what they're doing. And what happens? Verse 4. And Esther's maidens and the chamberlains came and told her what? That Mordechai is outside. And the king was that Mordechai was wearing sackcloth and ashes and weeping and crying. You know, what's he shouting about? Look at verse 1. He cried with a loud, bitter cry. V'yitzak Saka Gedola Umara. The other place in the Torah, like I said, every verse has linkage to other places. The other place in the Torah where it has this cry with a loud and bitter cry is when Esav is tricked of the blessings by Isaac, by Jacob, from Isaac's blessings by Jacob. He says, when Isaac says to him, your brother came and took with cunning, took your blessings, or with wisdom, as Rashi translates it, he cries out with a great cry and says, Father, did you not save a blessing for me? The battle of Jacob and Esau. Esau's grandson is Amalek. Amalek is the sworn enemy of the Jew. So this loud and bitter cry that Mordechai is crying out for the oppression that Esau is giving to him. We also see it as an appeal to Father Isaac in heaven. But either way, even there, if you remember, Jacob had dressed up in Esau's clothing, and he had worn the clothing of Esau, which here he's removing that clothing. So he's removing that. Here's the big question. How assimilated were the Jews in Persia? How assimilated were they? I would have to say, most would say very. Esther and Mordechai. Esther's in the queen's palace. She's in the king's palace. She's hiding, but the fact is, this is we see this as an atonement for all the assimilation taking place. That this is how the victory has to come about, where she herself is forcibly brought to the palace to become queen. But the idea that they are hobnobbing with the rich and famous, they are leadership positions, they are part and parcel of the economy, part and parcel of sitting in the king's gate, is an act of wearing Esau's clothing, dressed up, walking like an Esau. And what he does here is he removes that clothing to such a degree he can't even enter into the place. And Esther is surprised. And the Hebrew word here, vakis chalchal, literally has a root word which means like she was hollowed out. So she's somehow like, I'm gutted is the expression in English. But they say could be she miscarried. She may have been holding a baby and she miscarried. And the child that's born afterwards is Darius, who allows the Jews to rebuild the temple. But she miscarries. And she sends clothing to dress Mordechai and take off his sackcloth. Esther's unaware of this decree. In verse 3, every province where the king's order is going and his edict reaches is great mourning. Esther is ensconced in the palace, unaware, not uncaring, but unaware, disconnected, hiding, so to speak, in the palace. She thinks it might be a personal thing. So she sends him clothing because she wants to talk to him. And here's the big issue. If you believe in the political process and you believe that your salvation is going to come about because you have connections in high places, Mordechai should put on his best clothing, go talk to Esther, and plot out a political response to a political problem. But Mordechai sees this as being a spiritual problem. Haman is the axe in the hand of the Creator. There's a flaw in the Jewish people that is allowing for disaster. We have created an element where we have made our lives precarious and in the hands of the wicked. It's not enough to just get rid of Haman. Haman is a symptom to an illness that exists within us, is how Mordechai is seeing it. And Mordechai needs repentance of the Jews, and he needs prayer. The fact that he has to talk to Esther is not being couched in diplomatic parcels and terms, but rather in a way of crying and prayer. And even when he comes to Esther, he's dressed up in the act of prayer, shocking her out of her complacency. He doesn't accept it. Now, this intimate relationship that's happening in this chapter of Mordechai and Esther, this conversation to and fro, is not even done face to face. It's done through Hasach. Look at verse 5. Esther summoned Hasach, one of the king's chamberlains. Some say he was Daniel. The word Hasach means cut down. Daniel had been cut down from his rulership under Nebuchadnezzar, and now he's working in a lower level. But he's someone that Esther can trust because he becomes the messenger. He had appointed before her, and she commanded him concerning Mordechai. Ladas amazeh ve'amazeh. What this was and why this was. She senses there's a mourning here that's more than just personal because he refused the clothing. So she understands, she's a smart lady. She understands there's something there. But look at the Hebrew. What was this and why? She also wants to know what is the decree and what's the spiritual reason for the decree. Why is this? So Asach goes forth to Mordechai to the king's square, which was before the king's gate. And this is something I remember from my teacher in 4th grade. He said that, and this is for the Medrash, it just was something that I remember this when I first heard it. If you want to say a secret, don't huddle in a corner. Go in a public space. Like all the Russian spies, you walk around the park, you meet, you bump into each other, you share some pleasantries, and you pass on your message. Or Russian spy novels. But anyway, my point only is you go to the public sphere and then you have a conversation and no one knows what's going on. As we'll see in the text, we're concerned about Haman knowing that Mordechai, he knows Mordechai is a Jew. Mordechai is the one that was a catalyst for this because he refused to bow to him. He hates Mordechai. If he sees Mordechai talking to Esther, who knows what he'll do? So we're trying to keep the king, we're trying to keep Haman out of the loop. So Hasach goes to the king's square, and Mordechai told him, "Eis kol asher karahu," everything that happened to him, to Mordechai personally. What happened to Mordechai personally? We don't know yet. And the full account of the silver. All this is secret information from behind closed doors. This wasn't released to the public that Haman had proposed to weigh out into the king's treasuries of the Jews' account to cause them to perish. The Hebrew word, again, if you look at the Hebrew, la'abdam, to get rid of them, which does not necessarily mean to kill and destroy. It can mean to disperse them. It can mean to enslave them. It can mean to impoverish them, like we saw from the other biblical texts. So that Mordechai is explaining to Esther what happened here. Mordechai said what had befallen him. What had befallen him? He said, I didn't bow to Haman, and he got upset. And this is what caused it. So, but he doesn't regret. We don't see regret on Mordechai's point. Mordechai believes that this is the call of the hour for the Jew to be a proud Jew and to stand up. And if it wasn't this, Haman would have found another excuse. You know, when a certain individual came by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he was telling the Rebbe, if Israel just gave away more and more territory to the Arabs, you know, for their promises of peace, so then the anti-Semites would stop being anti-Semites. And the Rebbe said, you know, I grew up in Russia, and I saw from a young age that those who wanted to hate didn't need excuses. So, in other words, if you're going to ask the question, does it make Israel more secure or less secure to give up terror? That's a different type of question. But to appease the anti-Semites, you're not gaining anything.
It's 8 o'clock.
By destroying who you are and endangering yourself or even changing your religion. This is what Mordechai was fighting for. But he tells her, here's another key word. Karahu is also the word used when Amalek, the great granddaddy of Haman, attacks the Jews for no reason when they leave Egypt many, many years earlier. It says, Asher korcha baderech, that which they befell, they happened upon them, the same exact word. And Mordechai then, according to this reading, is saying this is part of the battle of Amalek against the Jews. that he's continuing this battle. And our great-grandfather, as we'll see in a moment, Saul, Esther and Mordecai's great-grandfather, who we said Ben Kish, Saul's father's name was Kish. And Mordecai's grandfather, they give him the name Kish, whether it means his great-great-great-grandfather or there was another Kish in the family line. But the point is, we're linking Mordecai and Esther to Saul, as we'll see explicitly in this text. So, but here in verse 8, if you look at the difference between 7 and 8, 7 says what the king had agreed to. 8 says what Haman did. And the copy of the writ of the decree that was given in Shushan, which was Lahashmid Laharog Ulabeid, to kill, destroy, and wipe out. To show Esther, to tell her. So some say what he's doing here is say, Esther, show the king that his close confidant, second in command, Haman, was pulling the wool over his eyes. Haman was trying to fool him because the king had signed off Labdam to sell them into slavery, to get rid of them, and not to kill and wipe out men, women, and children in one day, to order her to come before the king to beseech him and to beg him for her people. Levakesh mufanav al amma. Now, the Hebrew word litzavos, to command. What's fascinating here, there are many turning points in the Megillah. This is an interesting turning point where the protagonist of this story until this moment is Mordecai. Mordecai is the one that is stepping in the eye of Haman, at least from the last chapter. Haman is upset with him. Mordecai is the one that finds out about it, comes to Esther. Earlier, the chapter before, Mordecai was the one telling Esther, don't reveal who your people are, where you come from, and Esther listening. Esther is the obedient cousin or possibly even wife. We had the terminology in the first week that he took her as a daughter, which is read as the Hebrew word taking someone is used for marriage. And it's read as taking her to his house, to be his house, to be his foundation, to be his match, to be his. So some would say that this tragedy is even greater. Esther and Mordecai were married. But either way, we'll get to that soon. But either way, Mordecai is the commander, is the one with the advice. Mordecai is the leader of the Jews. Esther is in loyalty to him, and she listens. But we're going to see a flipping of the script where Esther becomes the protagonist. Esther becomes the one telling people what to do, including Mordecai. Of course, in a respectful partnership way. But at the end of the Megillah, they both end up together being the leaders of the Jews and even instituting the mitzvahs of Purim and the installation and the inclusion of the Megillah in the canon, in the Tanakh, in Holy Scripture. Okay, what happens? This poor Hasach guy. Hasach comes, told Esther what Mordecai had said. We have this middleman going back and forth. And Esther said to Hasach, and she ordered him. Now she's doing some ordering herself. To tell Mordecai, okay, Mordecai, slow down. We have 11 months. I'm in the palace. Listen, Mordecai, all the king's servants and the people of the king provinces know. So there's a little bit of, hello, Mordecai, you know this too. Any man or woman who comes to the king into the inner court who is not summoned, there's but one law for him. There's not the king's arbitrary anger, drunkenness that got him to kill Vashti, which maybe the king will have an on day, maybe he'll have an off day, maybe he won't be drunk, maybe he won't be angry. No. There's a law. Be put to death, except the one to whom the king extends a golden scepter that he may live. So death is inevitable if the king doesn't stick out his scepter. And I have not been summoned to come to the king these 30 days, which is one of two things. Either he's not so happy with me now, or he will be wanting to see me very soon. Either way, this is not the best time. Don't rush it. Don't feel pressured. Why do we have to act now? The decree is not happening for another 11 months. It was the 1st of Nisan. What are we rushing for? Okay. Okay, not the first. I'm sorry, because it was exactly a year. So it's the 13th of Nisan, a day before Erev Pesach. Okay, and because it says from day to day. Earlier we read that, so it's exactly the 13th. And they told Esther's words to Mordechai. Wait, what happened to Asach? Look at verse 12. Vayagidu, when they told. Some say Haman saw this unusual traffic going back and forth, Mordechai, in the town square with a messenger of Esther's right-hand man going back and forth. So he just went and killed Asach. Get rid of the couriers. Get rid of the means of communication. Shut down their cell phones, electronic warfare. This is what Haman does. He cuts down, but somehow Esther sends another messenger and they tell to Mordechai. And here goes. This is the great plea of Mordechai. But Yomer Mordechai. Mordechai said, Lahashiv, to respond, El Esther, to reply. Al tadami b'nafsheich. Do not imagine to yourself, to your soul, lihimaleit, to escape Beis HaMelech, the house of the king, Mikol HaYehudim, from all the Jews. Either he's saying, don't think you're going to get away with it. If the king's decree is kill every Jew, then you might be included too. You don't know what's going to happen. Or he's saying, seemingly she wasn't arguing. She was just saying, let's be political, let's be smart. And Mordechai was already showing by his act of coming out into the open that this is not about politics. It's about God and religion and destiny and the purpose of the Jewish people and our mission and our covenant. So she says, don't think you could hide. He says to her, you don't think you could hide in the king's. Don't, or it could mean, don't see yourself as being, so to speak, part of the palace. You're thinking like a politician now, which is in the right, proper place. But I'm telling you, there's something much deeper going on here. Look what he says. If you'll be quiet now, salvation and relief will come for the Jews from another place. Va'at, and you, uvei savich, and your father's house, till they will be lost. Umi yodeya, and who knows, im la'es kazos higat l'malchus, that it was for this purpose, a time like this, that you attained the kingdom. So let's analyze this and let's parse these words. Relief and rescue will come from elsewhere. In Hebrew, elsewhere, mimakom acher. In rabbinic language, Baruch HaMakom, Baruch Hu. Makom is the name of God. God is the one running the show. So this is seen as an illusion. God will bring salvation. There are many messengers. It happens to be you went through this torturous ordeal of being plucked from your family, from your only surroundings of your people, and you're in this horrific king's palace where you are struggling to keep Torah and mitzvahs. All that is all for one purpose only, lined up for right now. And then the other word, va'at, and you, uvei your father's house will be lost. If you remember, we said that both Mordechai and Esther are descendants of Saul. Saul had lost the right of kingship when he had not killed Agag. Agag was the king he was the last one of the Amalekites, and Saul was supposed to kill him. But he did not kill him, and he also did not get rid of the sheep, whatever the story was, with the Amalekites who were the sworn enemies of the Jews, and he loses it. Esther has a chance to rectify her father's household's mistake. You can rectify the kingship of Saul. There's a blemish on Saul in the future generations of his failure that allowed anti-Semites to multiply and to once again rear their ugly heads and try to hurt us. So you have the ability to fix that. And then he says maybe even deeper, not just why you reached the kingdom, Who knows whether the time like this you will attain the kingdom? In other words, everyone has opportunities in life, which is unique opportunities, which might be the whole purpose of your creation. Your portion in heaven, of course, every Jew has to keep all the mitzvot of the Torah. But everyone has unique missions. And the unique mission is, we don't always know what it is. It could be to help a fellow. It could be just to help a simple fellow. Like the Baal Shem Tov taught, a soul could come down 70, 80 years just to do a favor for another. This means the unique mission that we have may just be to be there for someone. Here, Mordechai is saying your whole purpose in life, in destiny, in history, might just be this. You might be the linchpin of Jewish history. And for sure, for yourself, this might be your sole purpose.
But Rabbi Yafi, she are you saying she was related to the house, to Saul?
Yes,
Saul
she was. She
relative?
was. We said right when we described who she was and who Mordechai was, we said we give Mordechai's lineage and we say she's his cousin.
Right.
So the grandfather, they share the same grandparents, who was Saul's family.
Saul's family.
Right.
But
So yeah.
If she were here to rectify the sin of that we didn't wipe out the line of anti-Semites.
Well, it was at least, in other words, the failure of Saul that he did. There was an element there that allowed for Haman to come into existence.
Right.
If Saul would have killed Agag, this wouldn't have happened. He's an Agagite.
Yeah.
It's almost like she's given the opportunity. There's poetic justice here.
Right.
Nothing is happenstance. It's all part of the plan. It all fits in, so to speak. All the pieces are coming together, so to speak, in this version. Then Esther ordered to reply to Mordechai. What does she say? Lech kenos es kol haYehudim. Go assemble all the Jews who are found in Shushan and fast in my behalf, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days. 1 second. Just say fast for 3 days. In Judaism, fasting means don't eat and don't drink. Why the redundancy? Well, if we see that the reason for this decree happening was because the Jews had enjoyed the feasting with Achashverosh, that was one of the reasons. So she's stressing the way to rectify the pleasure that they had feasting with Achashverosh is for the Jews in Shushan, because those were the ones. She's not saying all the Jews everywhere, because they weren't at the party. The Jews of Shushan were at the party. And he's saying they should fast, which means they should not just act of prayer. Fasting in Judaism is repentance and prayer and charity. But the idea of not eating and not drinking, which is part and parcel, is being expressed here, because it is the theme of rectifying the sin of them having pleasure at the Suda. The Rebbe asked the question. We spoke earlier about the sin being idol worship. We didn't like the reason given among some sources that was because they had pleasure. And the Rebbe asked the question, how can you say a nation is going to be wiped out because they went and they ate not kosher? It's not one of the cardinal sins. It's not like the golden calf. It's not like murder. It's kosher. And not just that. We read the words imply that they were able to get kosher. And they had glatt kosher with the best mashgichim. And because the Talmudic text says they had pleasure, not they ate treif. They had pleasure. What's wrong with having pleasure? So Rebbe gives us an insight into understanding divine providence of the Jewish people. There is a rule of nature. The rule of nature is the Jew is one sheep among 70 wolves. The lifespan of a sheep among 70 wolves is not very long. Okay? You could count it on your fingers. There's a famous zoo in Israel, the joke goes, called the Messiah Zoo. And they have the wolf lying with the lamb. And the visitors ask the zookeeper, how do you pull this off? How do you have the wolf lying with the lamb? He says, every day, new lamb. The Jewish people, if left among all these violent creatures, the nations that hate us, we would disappear. This is the story of history. It is only because we have a strong shepherd. When we choose to be outside the shepherd's guidance, we're not being punished when the Hamans of the world want to kill us. It's a natural reaction that does exist. And the natural reaction is that the wolves will want to tear apart the lamb. That's it. So the idea of them having pleasure meant they were saying, wow, the king loves us. We're safe and secure. We have leadership. The Jews are vice president, daughters-in-law, sons-in-law, advisors, high officials. We're really good over here. We don't need God. God forbid. We're taken care of politically. And Esther is saying that we're going to rectify that. The eating and drinking was a symptom of something else. Just like Mordechai had said that he doesn't want to rely on we're going to use political connections, but it's really all about God and repentance. Esther's saying the same thing, and she proves it now. Look what she says in middle of 16. Day and night. That means a 3-day fast, because normally you don't fast day and night except Yom Kippur. This is tough, 3 days. Also, I and my maidens will fast in a like manner. We're going to fast too. Then I will go to the king. Contrary to the law. Uchasher avaditi, ovoditi. And if I perish, I perish. What is she saying? She's saying, well, if I'm going to go to the king, and I'm the king, I'm going to twist him around my little finger because he chose me from among all other women in the kingdom. Well, he hasn't called me 30 days, but he'll be really happy to see me. I'm going to use all my feminine wiles. A little secret, fasting 3 days doesn't do wonders for your complexion. Well, she's going to be weak, falling on her face. So if you're going to rely on politics and connections, you make sure you dress in the parts. What's going on here? You're going to be so faint, you're going to have to be supported by your handmaidens, as we're going to see. Because Esther recognized too, this is not a political problem. It's in a political form, but it's a religious problem. It's a spiritual problem. It's a covenant to destiny problem. And therefore, the fix has to be set from there. The Hamans are a symptom. Achashverosh is a symptom. I have to, of course, work within the system. God wants us to work in the system, but I can't think the system is autonomous. That is subtle idol worship. We've been studying every Sunday morning for the last year almost the gate of trust, Rabachia min Bakuda. And the central theme is that everything that happens to us in this world is ultimately from God, and do not ascribe force and power to other things. But coupled with that, you do have to work within the world. So Esther and Mordechai are both working within the world. As a matter of fact, this whole thing about working in the world, but they're not ascribing power nor autonomy any more than a farmer should kiss the ground when the seeds begin to sprout, or kiss the rain when it begins to rain on his crops, because they are just a means to an end. These are subtle forms of idol worship. Okay, now what does it mean, kasher avadati, avadati? If I'm lost, I'm lost. This double language is seen as Esther saying something very profound. According to the interpretations that we spoke about earlier, that Esther was married to Mordechai, but only when she was taken by the king, it was by force. And she was a passive participant in their relationship. And therefore, it was more akin to rape. But if she goes willingly to the king, which as queen, going to the king for this purpose, and she's going willingly, so that is an act showing the rest of the Jewish world and herself, and so to speak, God, that she's going willingly to the king. So from a Jewish law perspective, if such a story happened, where the woman went willingly to to put herself in a position where she would commit adultery, even if it was for a good cause, she would not be allowed to remarry her husband. So basically, at this moment, she'll no longer, in any fantasy of the future, of being able to reconcile with Mordechai. Although there's even a tradition in the Talmud that in the period before, I know this is gonna shake your boat a little bit, but in the period before the story, the couple of years where she was in the king's palace, she would go to mikvah and live with Mordechai and sleep with Mordechai secretly. Now, whether everyone agrees with that is another conversation. But the point of it is, even if that didn't happen, the fact if she was married to him, and even if she wasn't married to him, the idea that she's going willingly to this Gentile is an act which is akin to knowing relations with this person. So kasher avadati means if I am lost in this world, if he kills me, or if I'm even lost in heaven. I gave up my body for the Jewish people. Literally, it's a horrific story. You know, the great tragedy of Purim is sometimes not noticed because all the little girls get dressed up like Queen Esther. The queen is a tragic queen. She's a heroic queen, but this is tragedy. This is Jewish women being raped by Cossacks and by I don't want to say throughout the ages. This is horrific. This is the most base, the greatest debasement of what it means to be a Jew. And here she is. She's forced, so to speak, to go willingly to him, and then she's going to invite him to these parties where she's basically seducing him. Let's be honest. There's no way. This is what it's about. He didn't marry her for her witty responses. He loved her. He was taken by beauty. That was the whole point. Let's cut to the chase here. We have a problem. She's going to seduce the king. She is giving up her soul for her people. This is self-sacrifice.
For a higher purpose. That's what I don't get. It's
yes,
not like she's doing
it is a higher purpose, but it is more than giving up your life. Here's the point. In other words, it is more than just giving up your life for your religion. In other words, not just you being killed. There's something more going on here. She's giving up her marriage to Mordechai. She's giving up literally, she's bonding with this murderer. I don't want to call him a Hitler because Haman was Hitler. He was the useful idiot, but he still signed the decree and he agreed to enslave them all. He's a horrific character, Achashverosh. She's going to be with him. Afterwards, he's going to want to sleep with her. I'm assuming. She's assuming. And she's going willingly. So yes, it is true. The Talmud says a quote, which is very dangerous. It's a very dangerous quote. In other words, if you do a sin for the sake of saving such a sin, like, in other words, I cannot kill an innocent Jew in order to save 1,000 innocent lives, because one life is equal to many lives. So from a Jewish point of view, if you would ask a rabbi, a Rav, what should Esther do, they couldn't necessarily tell her to do something like this. This is self-sacrifice beyond the rule of law. And here's the line the Talmud says, and it's a problematic line, don't get me wrong. Talmud says, better a sin for the sake of heaven than a mitzvah not for the sake of heaven. What is a sin for the sake of heaven? This is Esther and Yael. Yael is the one who sleeps with Sisera a number of times till he's tired out, and then she feeds him wine and he gets drunk and she cuts off his head, much as Judith with Holofernes does much later. Sorry, she first puts a stake into his head, Yael, and then that's how she kills him. But the point is, a sin for the sake of heaven is highly problematic. This is the ultimate in self-sacrifice for the Jewish people. She's giving up her sense of self. Basically, she's putting everything that she justified, how she put up with being raped by Achashverosh until then, now is retroactively being thrown out the window. I mean, I don't want to say thrown out the window, but as a person, she's being crushed. And she's taking the lead here. In other words, she starts taking the lead. She tells Mordechai what to do. She says, tell the Jews, command them to fast 3 days. And the last line of this verse is an interesting line. Again, I don't want to oversimplify this, but I would just say this is the ultimate of self-sacrifice, of giving up your personality, your identity, your everything, your all, much more than the 3 single guys who let themselves be thrown into the fiery furnace for God. Here she is giving everything for her people. Much as Mordechai, by the way, when we said earlier, when it happened to him, it was singular. The Rebbe says Mordechai also had connections. He could have tried to weather the storm with Esther, but he didn't see what was happening to another Jew as something separate. It was happening to him. This was him. And the suffering of every Jew is felt by them strongly. All right, so what the last line? The Ya'avor Mordechai, and Mordechai passed, and he did according to all that Esther commanded him. The baton has exchanged hands. The scepter is now in the hand of Esther. She's telling Mordechai, Mordechai's listening. She understands her destiny. But what is the Hebrew word, and Mordechai passed? What do you mean he passed? What did he pass? What does that even mean? So there are 2 interpretations in the Talmud. Either the city of Shushan was separated by a river, like a moat, between the castle and the city, and he crossed over the river. And the truth is that if you take a look, there are satellite images today of Susa. They excavated the actual biblical Shushan, and there was a river there. So this quote from the Medrash actually fits in with the geographic reality. But there's another interpretation. V'yavor means, and he transgressed. Mordechai sinned, not just Esther. Mordechai sinned too. How? He had all the Jewish people fasting. On what day was this? Well, that first day was the first day was Yud Gimel at night. I'm sorry. It was Yud Gimel when he comes to her, the 13th day of Nisan. So the 3 days that is coming up, they're going to be fasting over the Seder. Now, whether it was 1 day or 1 night or 2 nights, one of the Seders or both of the Seders are fasting. That means they're not eating and they're not doing the mitzvah and they're breaking Passover. Either, they're not eating chametz, but they're not doing the mitzvahs of Passover. They're fasting. Esther said to Mordechai, if there are no Jews, there'll be no mitzvahs. So let them fast and repent. That will bring home to them what we're about to lose here, what is happening, and how crazy this is, and what an incredible time this is that we have to repent. So Mordechai transgresses, so to speak. And now we have a rule, and I'll close with this. A prophet is allowed to overturn a positive commandment in a temporary fashion. Like we find Elijah allows them to bring sacrifices on Mount Carmel for a one-time event. So a prophet is not allowed to get rid of any commandment permanently, but a prophet is allowed to overturn temporarily a commandment. And this was, again, Esther is seen as a prophet, Mordechai is seen as a prophet, and they are able to do this. But this idea of the core of this chapter is, it may look political, but it's not political. It's really about God and about our connection to Hashem that we have to fix. Now, all that's hidden in the text, but there are so many linkages to other places that allow us to see it in totality. Okay, so let us.
Wait, Rabbi.
I'm not closing. I'm just getting rid of the share.
Oh.
I'm just getting rid of it. Wait, why is it still showing up? Sorry, bear with me. Okay, either way.
I just wanted to understand, did Esther merit having prophecy after the, acceptance of this role or the fasting? When did
Yes,
it occur? Yeah.
at what point? Right, it's a fascinating question. It's a fascinating question. I do not know. She is counted as one of the prophetesses when we count who they are in the Tanakh. For sure, with the writing of it, again, there's different debates about who wrote what exactly. We have her in the text writing some of the Megillah, which is divine inspiration. But that's a very good question. If at this moment is when she gets it, possibly, that's the first prophecy we have from hers. Until now, she's passive receiving. The fact that she's commanding, I would think that that's a very good clue. I don't know this, I'm gonna have to look it up, that it's at this moment with a prophecy, because she's also commanding them to break, which is the proof of prophecy almost, is because otherwise to break this would be problematic.
Right. And she lives the rest of her life in the kingdom?
Yeah, she lives the rest of her life as a like it's the expression is, I mean, later on, yes, the expression is like in a golden cage, but she's still how can I put it, a leader of her people, because it becomes known that she's a Jew. Her child Darius, who is a Jew, Darius is a Jew halachically. Halachically, Darius is a Jew, and he goes on to be the king of the Persian Empire.
Right.
But halachically he's Jewish, and he allows.
Isn't he the one you said allowed the Jews to go back and start rebuilding
and finish rebuilding the temple because they had stopped? Exactly. Some years later.
Wow.
All right. Very well, everyone.
Thank you. Okay.
A pleasure. Good to see everyone. Sunday we do 10:30 to 11:30, a little more Hasidic interpretation, and then we'll be back next week, Wednesday, to do chapters 5 and 6. And I also sent out an email for next Thursday night, my brother the spy, about Ellie, what's his name? Ellie Cohen. Sei gesund, everyone. Take care, Bubby, Arthur, and whoever else, Wayne, and Mrs.
Thank
Stambler.
you very much. Thank you very much, Rabbi.
You're very welcome. Always a pleasure to see you. Next time, I hope to hear from everyone. Feel free to interrupt me.
I have started to attend Rebbetzin Yafi's Tuesday session, and I love it. She's
beautiful. Wonderful. I will pass that on.
She's wonderful.
I think so too.
And my niece from New York, I sent her the link. She's attended twice.
Beautiful.
But she's in Israel now, so hopefully when she comes back.
Beautiful. Thank you, Leah. You've gotten more participants than anyone else we know. Take care. Good to see you, Ronnie.
All right,
everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right. Be well. Bye.